What's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about Astral Chain and what we need to stop doing when it comes to this game and start realizing a few different things, because I've seen all sorts of weird and just basically wrong takes when it comes to Astral Chain. Then also Sony, and if they're killing their own IP diversity with the most recent report from Jason Schreier, what went down with Days Gone 2 and what's going on with The Last of Us remake and kind of what they're going for with their style of game. So let's first start with Astral Chain, because this is something that I see quite a bit from Nintendo fans, and this is something that I don't really understand, because every other first party manufacturer has done this and they get the full credit for said game or said IP. But for some reason with this game Astral Chain, people necessarily don't want to give Nintendo credit for this game. So we're going to go ahead and put an end to this right here at this point, because I find this to be very interesting. So Astral Chain, many people still don't know, but Astral Chain is a first party Nintendo IP. Astral Chain, Nintendo owns the IP to that. Now, Platinum Games developed this game, okay? But some people still see it as it's not Nintendo. They didn't do anything. It's Platinum Games' title. It's third party. It's something else. And no, that's not the case at all, because Platinum Games worked with Nintendo, and Nintendo, they funded the game. They published the game. They helped come up with ideas for the game. They marketed the game. They did everything that a first-party publisher should do for an IP that they own, and they worked with the best developer to get that done. Now, there has been multiple other companies that have done this, and they get the credit for it. Now, the company that I'm going to use just for the sake of time is Sony and Ratchet & Clank. For the longest time, up until not too long ago, Ratchet & Clank was developed by Insomniac, okay? Insomniac was not owned by Sony. Insomniac was a third-party developer, independent developer, a large-scale one, just like Platinum Games, that could make AAA style of games or bigger budget games for anybody that was willing to hire them. Now, the IP owner of Ratchet & Clank is Sony. Sony always got the credit for Ratchet & Clank games. People didn't say, oh, well, that's Insomniac. That's not Sony. No, Sony owns the IP. They're the ones who fund it. They market it. They publish it. They're the ones who get the idea across in terms of what they want to do with it and what they're going to go with. And they give it to the developer. And yes, they develop it. They have their developers who do everything and make the game. But that doesn't mean Sony doesn't get credit for that, because it's a third-party developer. Now, obviously, Sony owns Insomniac, but for many of the Ratchet & Clank games, they didn't. I mean, and this goes to multiple other games. We have this other game coming out, Returnal, for example, from Sony on the PlayStation 5. That's Housemarque, and they are not owned wholly by Sony, but Sony's going to own that IP. So I don't understand this thought process of some Nintendo fans of not giving Nintendo the credit for it, because to be honest, there was an interview that was done with Tora-san, the producer of the game, the lead producer, and he stated that Nintendo was vital providing direction for the game, that the game was originally supposed to be some type of like magic and sorcery type of game where you shoot magic out of your hands and stuff, and Nintendo decided to tell them to go with the theme of like the legions and the robots and stuff like that. So that is someone, the publisher, actually helping form the direction of what your game is going to end up being, and they own the rights to it. So therefore, that is first party game. Nintendo can do what they want with it since it is their game. So they need to be given credit just like any other manufacturer, whether it's Microsoft, Sony, or whatever the case is giving credit when they develop a new IP with another company. It doesn't always have to be that Nintendo owns the company in order for that game to be a first-party title. Now, another example of this is Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem Three Houses was made by Koei Tecmo and also by Intelligent Systems. Nintendo doesn't own Koei Tecmo or Intelligent Systems, yet Fire Emblem is an IP owned by Nintendo, and everyone thinks of Fire Emblem as a Nintendo first-party IP. So we need to stop saying that something isn't owned by Nintendo or it's not their game just because a third-party developer makes it, because Nintendo has had multiple different games where they've done that. I can give you guys some more examples if you want to just keep going down this rabbit hole here. So F-Zero GX, that is a game that was made by Sega, okay? And F-Zero is owned by Nintendo, so I guess Sega owns F-Zero or something like that, or they own F-Zero GX? No, it's still Nintendo's IP, it's still first party. Same goes for Star Fox Zero, that was made by Platinum Games. Nobody ever said, oh, well, that means it's a Platinum Games third party, it's something else. No, it was still Nintendo's IP. It's the same thing here, but the only difference is that Nintendo started it with them, right? It's not an established IP that was brought over, so people kind of already have a thought process in their head. But at the same time, it doesn't matter when it happens. It's the IP ownership that's important here, and that's what people aren't understanding. So if you're going to give Sony credit for the games that they developed, right, with Insomniac before they were purchased, then you have to do the same thing here. It's the IP owner. They're the ones who decide what to do with it. And at the end of the day, it's their IP and they should be given credit for that. Now, Platinum Games, obviously, they get the credit too. They're the ones who are pulling the heavy weight. They are making the game. They know what they're doing. But it shouldn't just be like, oh, well, that's a Platinum Games title. It's like, well, wait a minute. The game wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Nintendo in the first place. They need money. They need a lot of money. This isn't the type of game to where you can just do on your own without any type of funding, unless you're like Star Citizen or something like that, or you can raise your own funding on Kickstarter or whatever. But a game like Astral Chain, that's an expensive type of game to make with the animations and everything that they're doing, which I've talked about this already before, but it seems like I consistently come across people that don't want to think that it's Nintendo for some reason, or don't want to think that they should get any credit for it. And I'm like, what? The game wouldn't even been here if it wasn't for Nintendo, and they own the IP. Enough said, and they helped drive the direction of the game. So I don't understand this thought process at all, and hopefully this clears things up for everybody once and for all. Now let's move on to the next topic here, and that is, if Sony is killing their own IP diversity, are they going with the too much of tried and true? This is something that pretty much all the console manufacturers and developers have sometimes been accused of, but Sony's under the microscope because of the latest report from Jason Schreier talk about how a Days Gone 2 sequel was killed off because the game had some issues and they didn't think it could be profitable enough, and they decided to go with a Last of Us remake instead, when there was a side studio for Sony that helps finish up projects, started developing it, and Naughty Dog took over, so that's going to be their next project. And then Sony Bend, who did Days Gone, now they're working on something else, like a new IP or something. But a lot of people are looking at Sony's games and are saying, okay, well, these are all just cinematic third-person type of games. Either it's like a Last of Us, where it's like third-person melee survival, or it's like a Days Gone where it's open world, or it's like a Housemarque type of game down, right? We have Returnal. They're not doing like the shoot 'em up style anymore. Now they're doing a third-person shooter rogue game. You have God of War, third-person action adventure, Horizon Zero Dawn, third-person open world RPG. I mean, a lot of this stuff is starting to kind of look similar, and then they have some of their staples like Gran Turismo, or even like Spider-Man, right? That's a third-person action game. So we're just getting a lot of third-person open world or survival type of action games, and the variety in terms of what we saw before, like the platforming, right? Like Jak and Daxter, or like Sly Cooper, like a little bit of stealth and platforming and action kind of all mixed together. Those are kind of dying away from Sony. So I'll say a couple things on this. I do feel that Sony maybe had a little bit more variety in terms of what they were doing beforehand, and it seems like they're kind of focusing in on some of those big budget blockbuster style of games that can sell. But I understand why, because they had a lot of variety with what happened before, right? Like with Japan Studio, that's another thing that people are upset about. Japan Studio, they got basically absorbed into Team Asobi. All the people that made all of the cool, different, unique type of games basically left. Sony, Gravity Rush, all that type of stuff, Folklore, all these different types of games, they basically left, right? So that even gives them less variety in terms of what they can pull from. No more Legend of Dragoon, like a lot of stuff that we've seen from Sony over the years, Ape Escape, there's all sorts of things that you can kind of go towards. But I mean, I am looking at it from both sides. From like a fan's perspective, yeah, it kind of sucks because Sony Japan Studio and some of these other types of games that they did before were some of my favorite that Sony did. But at the same time, I can kind of see what Sony's looking at it from their side, because people aren't buying those type of games, and people say, oh, well, there wasn't enough marketing or this and that. And I get it to a degree, but I think there was a lot of, well, I'm just not going to buy that because it's not what I want to buy too. I don't think it's all just marketing. I do think that there is a part to play in that with something like Gravity Rush, for example. Gravity Rush 2, which it seems like that game didn't even crack a million units sold, and even if it did, that's still a low amount for the type of install base that Sony had at the time when it released and everything. So I can understand where Sony's kind of coming from, but I do feel that it seems a bit rash when it comes to some of these things that fans are saying. And I think on both sides, I think Sony's definitely kind of going a bit safe when it comes to it, but it makes sense because these games cost so much money to make. There's so much like effort that needs to be put in and so much money. I don't think people realize how much it takes and what goes on with it. But at the end of the day, you know, as a fan, I'm looking at it like, man, I do wish that there was some of like Gravity Rush 3 or some of the other stuff that they did, a Legend Dragoon, something like that, Dark Cloud that they worked with back in the day. I mean, there was more variety than what we saw now at this point, where it does seem like everything is a cinematic type of third person type of game, and we don't really have some of those other genres out there when it comes to Sony. But we're going to have to see. I mean, there's rumors kind of swirling around and stuff that they're working on new IPs and they're working on some other stuff. So we're going to have to see what they do for this generation. But it does seem like they're trying to condense things just a bit when it comes to their bigger titles, that maybe they take a few chances here and there. I mean, obviously something like Astro Bot is a little bit different, or maybe we'll get something from some of their other studios, maybe some smaller projects, and we don't know what they're going to do with third-party developers. I think they're probably going to lean on like Square Enix or lean on some of these other companies to get exclusive third-party games that are different from what they do. So for example, like the Forspoken game, that's like a open world third person action adventure RPG, which they kind of make that with Horizon, but you know, it is something that's not quite the same, you know, kind of more of a hardcore action RPG, which Horizon kind of is too, but still, you guys see what I'm trying to say here. So I think they're going to try to reach out to some of these other developers and maybe they can get something going there. And they do have a road game coming with Returnal, which, yes, third person, you know, style of game, third person style of game where you're shooting, but at the same time, I mean, I still think that it is a little bit different from what they've done. So we're just gonna have to wait for the generation, see how things play out, see how some of these rumors kind of play out with what they're doing. But overall, I mean, yeah, I can see both sides. I can see where some fans are upset, and I can see where Sony's thinking, well, hey, we tried this and people didn't buy it. So we'll see how they do going forward. So what are your thoughts on these two topics here? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, peeps, that wraps it up for this video here. Check out the links in the description. We've got Twitter. Go ahead and give us a follow on there. Stay up to date on all latest gaming news and information. Also, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video if you can. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.